Says it's
Here
preparing to
we
live
are.
stream. Are we live?
It says we are live. Let's
Okay,
believe
great.
we are.
Absolutely.
Ta-da!
How do I come back to you? Okay, great. I'm back with you now, Jane. How are you doing?
Oh, I am very fine, thank you. I've had a very interesting, eclectic start to my week. I'm just sitting with all of that and just going with the flow. How about you?
Sorry, I just confused because YouTube suddenly started playing in the background, and I was like,
Oh,
so anyway,
okay.
but I've got YouTube.
Bee's always doing multiple technical wonders. I'm just thinking about, should I have had quite such a big piece of cake, or maybe I should have had more cake? And actually I'm nearly running out of cake, and I didn't buy cake yesterday, and
I haven't had cake for ages.
Well, good, because you're normally always baking, or someone has just baked you a cake, and I'm as we know, cake baking not doing in that space. So I'm actually in cake, well, not for long, probably I reckon I've got 2 days, and then boom.
How many slices is 2 days?
Well, I started off doing slices. Now I'm just doing breaking chunks off. So
oh my god,
I know, I'm just
I wouldn't be able to do that.
It's how I roll, Bea. I'm just like...
well, I know, that's amazing. I have actually just I've just started experimenting with intermittent fasting, which is something that's kind of been like in my orbit for a long time, and sometimes it gets a bit closer and then it goes further away.
So I'm having a panic attack now. No, seriously, that's very...
It kind of felt really like there, and I felt like maybe now's the time. And I reached out to a friend who's been doing it for over 10 years and asked her about it. And she gave me information. At first I felt a bit overwhelmed, and then 2 things happened. One friend felt called to pull a card for me from her pack of oracle cards, and she said she did it as a video, and she was shuffling. She said, look, just while I'm shuffling these cards, if you've got anything in particular that you feel like you want guidance about, you just get that in your head now before I pull a card. And instantly I just felt like I'd like guidance about whether it's right for me to do intermittent fasting. The card she picked was bang on, saying to me, now is the time to embrace something, even if you have anxieties about it or you're unsure, now's the time to step forward. And then a little bit later on, a huge spider, like the size of your head spider, not quite, but when you get those really big black spiders, was on my landing. And I was like, oh, hello, spider. And I just left the spider to it. Next morning, the spider was in my bathroom. And again, I just left the spider to it. And then I was having lunch outside of Green. This was at the end of last week. And there was another of these huge spiders just literally on the edge of his wall, his garden wall. And I suddenly remembered that spider medicine is all about creating new worlds and having the confidence and the belief in your ability to create newness in your life. And I thought, oh, well, there's the universe telling me again that I can be confident about creating newness. So I just thought, okay, well, I'll just see how it goes. And okay, I'm only on day 3, but I'm like, this is great so far.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. I think when we're ready for things, we're ready for them, aren't we? And if we're not ready for them, then no amount of effort is going to bring them about.
No, true. No, and which leads us beautifully into our topic today.
Yes, it does.
How do I get my child to?
Yeah.
So when we're ready to explore this and think about it differently, along comes Bea and Jane to help us do this. Poke it with a stick. We wouldn't poke spiders with a stick, but we might poke topics with a stick.
I just got water down the wrong way.
Let's
let's poke this topic with a stick. This came up because my next door neighbors have a 3-year-old and a baby, and it kind of just came up in a slightly kind of jokey kind of way, because there's huge differences in the way they parent and the way I parent. And I just said something along the lines of, yes, or wouldn't it be wonderful if there was a clear answer on how I can get my child to behave, like kind of like as a joke. And then they responded in their own way. But then I thought, yeah, actually, so many parents, that's the question they want the answer
It
to.
is.
How do I get my child to go to bed at 8 o'clock? How do I get my child to finish their food? How do I get my child to do their homework? How do I get my child to leave me alone for 5 minutes? How do I get my child to say please and thank you? How do I get my child to whatever it is? It's such a strong belief in many of us as parents that somehow we have this right to get our children to do things. You know, I mean, can you imagine if you turn around to someone, how do I get my husband to, you know, whatever it is, or how can I get my best friend to come to this place on Friday that I know she doesn't want to go to? Or, you know, like, you just wouldn't do that, would you? You would like accept that your husband has a preference for something different, or you would accept that your best friend doesn't want to go there on Friday, and you would work out a different way. And yet with children, we seem to think that because we're the grown-ups, that somehow it's okay for us to get them to do things.
Well, and I think that what's interesting as well is, and I just had it on some messages I had this morning from a parent, is what, of course, then the top down, because, you know, I was as you were saying, I was like, yes, there's the power, the parent with the power over the child, but then kind of behind the parent is other, like, sometimes it can be the partner, or it can be the grandparents, or every man, woman and their budgie and everything else, saying, well, you need to get your child to.
Yes.
You need to get your child to, you know, do this. You realize this is going to be a problem. You need to get your baby to sleep through the night. You need to make your teenager respect you, because this is going to come back to haunt you. So it's like we have this global, obviously not in every culture, but in, you know, across the world, this idea that parents need to get their children to do this. It'll be nice and tidier. And of course, this goes into schools and preschools as well. You know, the children need to learn to line up. They need to wait to go to the toilet. They need, I mean, if somebody said to me, Jane, you need to wait to go to the toilet until another half an hour, well, good luck. That would not end well on many levels. So I
mean, when I was on the radio a couple of weeks ago, and with Jonathan Vernon Smith, who you and I both know and love, and with BBC Three Counties, and he said it was all about teenagers and sleep, and the fact that he thinks they need to learn to get up early in the morning. And I was saying, well, no. And I was talking about, you know, the science behind that and how the teenage brain is developing and so on. But he said, well, you know, they need to learn, because when they're adults, they're gonna have to be able to get up and get to work on time and do this and do that. I said, yes. And when they're adults, their teenage brains will no longer be in this body clock that has shifted to a different time frame to children and adults. So as they move out of their teenage years into that adult phase, their body will come back to being more able to get up early. We don't need our teenagers to be doing that now in order to do it as adults. But it was interesting, because reflecting on that now in this conversation, I'm realizing it. I think so much of this, so from the perspective you described, which is those other voices that come into us, you know, your child, you know, you need to make sure your child does so and so. If you don't do this, then da 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 da. And so everything is driven by this idea that if we don't get our children to do things when they're children, then they will be incapable of doing it when they're adults. Well, what?
And then, of course, being told that as a parent, guess what? Makes you feel incapable. My lovely little mum, who I love dearly, she will say to me every now and again about my son, who was a 29-year-old 6'5" man, married, da 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 da. Well, you need to get Joe to do blah blah blah. And number one, I'd already thought of that. And number two, what part of he's a 29-year-old man, blah, 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 like, I need to get Joe to do that, do I? And so the fact that I'm not, that's, so that it goes on that long is all I'm saying. It can do. And, you know, now I can just very kindly say, yeah, mum, he's 29, But I guess it all comes from anxiety, you know, the anxiety of my lovely mum for Jose comes into me, and then if I don't hold my space really well, then I could put that onto him. Luckily I don't, but I can feel it as she's saying it, and I feel it, I experience it as a moment of shame even now, you know. Yes, I know Jose needs to ring the specialist doctor about blah 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 because he has an ongoing neurological condition, but he's 29 and he's making a choice at the moment not to do that. He's highly intelligent, highly informed, and it's his condition. But yeah, now I feel shame and I feel responsibility, whilst I've now got to hold the space of, but I would never do that to my child.
And it's interesting, isn't it, because I totally relate to that shame in, you know, very similar situations where, you know, don't you think you should get your, you know, son to do blah 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 blah. And I think that shame is essentially an echo that is directly related back to being shamed as children for not doing the thing that our parents are wanting to get us to do. Absolutely. And we, you know, until we are able to identify that and clear and heal the energy of that shame, because that shame essentially is trauma, and that trauma has, you know, there's a cellular imprint within our physical bodies of all trauma, including that shame that we're experiencing, and the fears that we might be experiencing when we're thinking, how do I get my child to, I don't know, do whatever we want them to do, to behave? How do I get my child to behave? You know, that is motivated by fear about what the future might look like if we don't get them to do it now. And that fear is also going to be rooted in some kind of trauma from our childhoods. So all of this situation, all of this conversation comes back to trauma. It comes back to the fact that we are operating on a subconscious level through a misguided set of beliefs and evidence around what is going to keep us safe and loved and in a state of belonging.
Yeah, that's so true. And, you know, I mean, some of you may have heard Bea and I talk about trauma before, and some of you may not. And, you know, what we're talking about is the small stuff. I mean, you know, trauma, there's stuff that one would hope would be apparent as trauma, you know, accidents, bereavements, any form of abuse. You know, I would hope, although I think still we struggle a bit around this to understand. But Bea and I are referring to the small injuries, or seemingly small injuries, which accumulate. So they you know, they have a kind of compounding effect in a child and their system. So obviously not their conscious intelligent brain, because that's only just beginning, but their whole system receives it as too much and too scary and too lonely, and I can't deal with this. And if that happens without being brought back to safe, it's okay, physically, emotionally, psychologically, and that carries on, then that becomes trauma. And this is one of the most, people are always saying to me, why don't people get this? And I'm like, I don't know. I've been talking about it for, you know, 16 years, pretty much every day of my life. But it's, and it, you know, we all have it. We all have it. And it doesn't make us, it makes us just who we are. But if we ignore it and then we play it forward because, you know, because it's uncomfortable to even think about it, then is that okay, would be my big question.
Yeah, I agree. And so I think just for the people who are listening, I think it's worth giving some examples of what those small things might be, because like you say, you know, most people know what the big T traumas are, even though there are kind of some gray areas that become unclear for people. But, you know, little T traumas could be the tone of your parents' voice, the phrase that they say, you know, the fact that they might say, you know, you need to try harder next time, or, you know, I don't know, trying to think of something else. You know, you're such an, you know, stop seeking attention, you're such an attention seeker,
or you're stupid, just don't be
or
so
you're stupid.
Yeah, you're just being stupid. Stop it.
Yeah, stop being such a silly little boy.
Yeah,
you know, or just even, you know, common things like, come on, that didn't hurt, get on with it. Up you get, you're okay, you don't need me.
Don't make a fuss.
Don't make a fuss. Or, you know, and other things I hear, you know, I mean, I hear things at playgrounds, you know, when a parent is clearly wanting to leave and the child doesn't want to leave, and the parent's exhausted, you know, all of their resources, you know, they'll say, that's it, I'm going then, bye.
Yeah,
And
they
I start
know I
walking
definitely
off.
did that. I got so many of these phrases are ringing true because I remember saying them to my child.
And I think people are so unaware that all of these experiences are traumatic for our children, and they're coming forward from our own experience of trauma. And that's the cyclical nature of this, is that unless we heal and clear our trauma, which is the work that both Jane and I do in our one-to-one sessions. I work with emotional freedom technique, and Jane works with quantum energy coaching, QEC, QEC, which always makes you think of QVC. So I prefer to find the full name. But anyway, imagine you on a shopping channel doing your energy work. We'd be quite good on a shopping channel, actually.
Brilliant. Oh my God, I could sell all my, my mug and my oils and this notepad.
Don't sell your stuff, sell stuff that other people
other people's stuff.
Yeah.
I know, I haven't quite got the concept.
Here, I have this beautiful old iPhone 7. Anyway, moving on. I just think we would actually be really good on a shopping channel.
We would. Hilarious.
But yeah, so we're basically operating within this ongoing cycle of trauma, and until we work in such a way to recognize, clear, and heal that trauma, that essentially is the energetic blueprint for our ongoing relationships, and then for our children's ongoing relationships, you know, and on and on and on. And this is why Jane and I talk about this so much, is because it is absolutely possible and actually not overly difficult to bring about these changes. When you're ready to do it, when you go, oh my goodness, I want to sort this stuff out in me so that I'm not carrying this forwards. It's not actually that difficult to do. It just requires your intention and your desire and your commitment to doing it. But, you know, this healing of trauma process is something that our bodies naturally want to do anyway. So when your child, for example, is experiencing a tantrum, which is, you know, because they're in that state of kind of overwhelm and overload, they're no longer able to express, you know, in ways that we find comfortable, all the big stuff going on in their body. And so they go into this tantrum state. But actually, if a tantrum is allowed to complete its process in a safely held space, and Jane and I talk a lot about holding space. If a child is held safely in a space to go through the fullness of their tantrum, actually what happens is their body and their brain work together to fully reset whatever caused the imbalance in the beginning, and the child comes out the other side and has healed their own trauma. And they'll just say, like, can we do Legos now? Or what's for tea, mummy? And at that point, you have that moment of transformation, which is where the human being has resolved and healed its own trauma. But most of us have not been raised in that safely held space to go through that process. And many of us are not raising our children in that way. And so there is like a stacking up, essentially a stacking up layer upon layer upon layer of trauma. And so if we bring this back to what this conversation is about, which is, how do I get my child to? One way, in some ways you could look at it, I've never looked at it this way before, but as I've been talking, I'm like, oh, it's almost like, well, how can my trauma, on a subconscious level, how can my trauma ensure that my child also experiences trauma? Because then it kind of creates an equilibrium. It's very difficult from that trauma space to support someone else to be in a completely whole and free space.
Yeah, no, completely. It's well, you know, I know this isn't by accident, but I was in a situation this morning in a business networking event, and I was in a room with, not literally, but in a chat room with three other business people. And, you know, we were there ostensibly for, I don't know, business reasons. I don't even know what that means. Don't know what the hell I'm doing there. But anyway, I was. And it got onto parenting. And one of them said, oh, you know what, I'm really thinking about becoming a parent now. But you know, it's a bit scary, and I'm a bit worried that some of my stuff is going to pay forward into that. And straight away, another person who is a parent jumped in and said, oh, you don't want to worry about that. You'll just, you know, that stuff will inform what you do with your children, and it was all gathering a bit of a head of speed. And I just really felt compelled to jump in and said, no, you do need to worry about that. If you are seriously thinking about becoming a parent, this would be the most amazing time to clear that stuff out. And then the other person was trying to come back in, and she's like, oh no, you know, because we'll just figure it out. And I was like, no. I spend every day of my life, as does Bea, working with parents who now realize, oh my God, my stuff is playing forward into my parenting and therefore into my children. Help. I need to stop doing this, because I don't want that, you know, however many books I read and however many courses I go on, and I can really understand, like, oh, this is amazing, these are brilliant resources, but then I can't do it because the childhood stuff keeps coming forward, and I fall back into, how do I just get this child to not do this or do that? Because that's the kind of underlying running narrative in most human beings. How do I, you know, they're going to go out into the world, so they need to know it's not okay to spit. I need to nip this in the bud. I need to find out how to stop them doing that. And then schools are saying, preschools often go down that route as well. Not all, as we know, but many do. And they'll say, well, you know, we've got 30 children in a class. They just have to learn the rules, and then they have to follow the rules. And if they can't, well, they get extra help. But you know, so again, it's, well, how do I get these children to? And it's just the least helpful thing we can do to a child.
There were two things that I wanted to respond to there, Jane. One was when you were talking about how you know, all of this stuff is really worth looking at before you compare. I mean, the fact that that person in your group has had the thought is amazing, because most of us just go ahead and have children without thinking. So I think that's incredible. But you know, now if you get the opportunity to do it before you become a parent, amazing. But it's not just about how it plays out with your children. It's also about how it's playing out with those other voices we talked about, the grandparents or the friends or the whoever, who, you know, how your own trauma is playing out with them, meaning you're feeling that pressure from them to get your child to do stuff, or from your partner or whatever. So, you know, that trauma is playing out in lots of different ways. And then the other thing that I wanted to comment on was that you mentioned about the spitting. And, you know, from a yes parenting perspective, whatever my boys have done, unless there's a definite reason why I absolutely cannot find a yes to it, you know, like if one of them decided it was really fun to try running out in the road and not get hit by a car, like that would be different. But when it came to spitting, I just used to go, awesome, let's do spitting. And we'd have spitting contests. We see who could spit the furthest. We'd spit at each other in the bath. I would find so many opportunities for us to spit together, because what my experience is that then, because when your child starts spitting, they're not spitting for the reason that all of our adult meaning puts upon it. They're spitting because they've discovered that they can spit, or because they like
come from their mouth. It's like, that's really interesting. Yeah. It's like picking your nose.
I love picking my nose.
There's stuff in here, and what is this stuff? It's like all these things are
exactly.
Well, clearly still find these things really fascinating. So why would not be? It's like you still need to discover
there is
something.
So many sensory aspects to spitting in and of itself. There's that whole sensory experience of pulling the saliva into your mouth and working out how to use your mouth to spit it. There's different, you can spit it in one bit, you can spit it in lots of, there's so many things about spitting that are just part of a child exploring their experience of the world. So from my perspective, I'm like, well, you know, let's go to town on that. Let's see if you can spit at me and I'll try and jump out of the way, or whatever it is. But I just did all that while my boys were interested in spitting. I just found lots of opportunities for us to spit, and then they weren't interested in spitting anymore, and then it had gone.
No, and I mean the thing is, the stuff that upsets us as adults is what we choose to be upset about that a child does, you know,
or what we've been told off.
Well, I was just going to say that. I was just going to say that.
Oh, sorry.
Literally. Yeah, and it always connects back to the things that we were most shamed for, which is why when they do it, they can be doing other things, and then they suddenly do that one thing, and when our resources are low, that's the one that we go to town on. And I used to work with pre-adoptive parents, and you would do an exercise with them saying, you know, so is there one, and I've done it actually with parents as well, is there one thing that is your red button? Like, they can do everything else, but if they do that one thing, do you think you're most likely to lose it at that moment? Have some time to discuss it. And then there would always be a one thing. And, you know, I would say to all of them, whether they were pre-adoptive parents or both, whatever, that will most likely be the one thing your child does, because it will be how they get the most connection with you. So it's about you becoming more comfortable with all your stuff, because particularly children who have high levels of trauma and have very complex ways of connecting with adults because of what's been done to them, they will sense really deeply what is the one thing that always brings them connection. And if that is kicking the dog, they'll do it accidentally, but then because of the reaction, and then it's, you know, and it's all about survival. It's not about being mean to dogs at all. It's just about what brings me into connection with adults. Therefore, that equals safety at a level below conscious thinking. It's just wired in. And those are the things then that we're just so anxious to get them to stop doing it. And, you know, it kind of sounds crazy when you say it all out loud, but it's honestly, it's just what everyone, I certainly did it. I have messages every day from parents I'm working with saying, okay, but how do I, yeah, that's all. And I've often done this as well when I've been doing stuff. People go, yeah, no, okay, trauma, yeah, tick, neuroscience, tick, but when are you going to tell us how we get the children to? I'm like, okay, point missed. Because I think it is just that driver, it feels like, doesn't it? Be like that driver by society of, you will be shamed as a parent, you will be judged on, you know, if your child is spitting in the street, or your child is shouting in the street, or whatever it is, or pushes in front of an old lady in the shop, or you will be judged. That's the tragic thing that we know.
Yeah. And I, you know, you coming back to connection is really where everything starts. You know, if you really want to know how to get your child to do anything, well, you start with connection, not from a manipulative place of, I'm going to connect with you in order to get you to do this thing, but you start from a place of connection, because that is one of the core needs that your child has. It's actually one of the core needs that you have as a So if you start with connection from a place of that being one of your primary focuses as a parent, in terms of, you know, yes, you sort them out with food and drink. Yes, you make sure that they have opportunities to rest and sleep when they're tired. But you also ensure a constant connection presence throughout the day. And you know, you ebb and flow within that. So it may be, I mean, obviously depending on the age of your child, because my boys are now teenagers, not interested at all in me kind of coming and snuggling in with them first thing in the morning and having connection time when they wake up. That would be absolutely not appropriate anymore. But you know, when they were younger, that was something that I loved to do. I mean, my boys on and off co-slept with me until they were well, one was 12, the other was 11, and it, you know, we just ebbed and flowed according to what was working for them at the time. So even if whether they were co-sleeping with me or whether we were in separate beds, one of the first things that I would look to do in the day was when they were waking up was to have really lovely connection time with them. And from that point on, I would be looking for those moments where I could just top up the connection like a bank account, like lots of little deposits into that bank account all the time. Because then when there is something that might try and withdraw from that bank account, I don't know what that might be off the top of my head, but something that creates a disconnection, the more deposits there are in that bank account of connection with my child, the easier it's going to be for me and my child to find our way through that disconnection. Now, if for whatever reason our bank account of connection is running really low, then we're going to have that small disconnection, and it's actually going to become a really big disconnection really quickly. And in that place, we potentially run the risk of increasing the level of disconnection unless we as parents can really come back to ourselves, to then holding this space and then reconnecting with our child. So connection and reconnection can look like lots of different things. It can be play, it could be physical affection. Obviously that has, all of these things have to be absolutely two-way consensual. That connection can be empathy and validating what they're sharing with you, their feelings and their thoughts. Even if they're saying to you, I hate my brother and I wish he'd never been born, many parents jump in with, well, you don't really mean that, and that's not a very kind thing to say. I've heard that from my boys quite a lot over the years, and I've just said, I know, I really hear that you really hate your brother right now and you wish he'd never been born. And then they'll say, not just right now, I've always hated my brother and I'm always going to hate him. And I said, okay, yeah, I hear that, and that's hard, isn't it? Gosh, but it's okay for you to feel that way. I've often said to my boys, it's okay for you to feel that way. And what that does is that holding that space for your child and creating the connection, genuine connection, through empathy and hearing them and validating their thoughts and their feelings, those are all deposits back in the bank account. So they bring you from a place of disconnection, so basically your overdraft, back into your credit, and then you start building it up again, and then you're working towards, at the end of the day, finishing the day with incredible connection, which quite often can be when any of the anxieties or concerns or anything that the child has been holding on to all day might all tumble out at bedtime, because there is this wonderful connection. But when we manage to do that as much as we can on a daily basis, and there are days where I did not manage that. So I remember, doesn't happen often now because of the age my kids are at, but when they were younger, and there's only 19 months between them, some days I would basically just be shouting from the minute they got up to the minute they went to bed. It was almost like that was just my default. And I would try really hard to pull myself out of it, but it was like I just couldn't. And then the next day I'd be back to being normal me again. But I don't know about you, Jane, but every now and then I would just have a day where it was like I just couldn't be this parent I wanted to be. But that's okay, because on the grand scheme of things, the level of connection that I invested in with my boys, not because I wanted to get them to do anything, just because I valued my relationship with them and their relationship with me, that stood the test of time in terms of those days when I was not showing up as the parent I wanted to be. It stood the test of time in terms of those days where my boys have felt deeply disappointed or frustrated or angry with me about something, or disappointed and sad about something out of their control that's got nothing to do with me. It all comes down to connection. So when you're thinking about well, how do I get my child, I don't know, to put their shoes on to leave the house? Well, if you haven't invested in connection with your child from the minute they woke up in the morning, you're automatically going to be up against it trying to do that. So connection is going to be really important. The second thing is I'd really question, do you need to get your child to put the shoes on before they leave the house? No, I can't think of a single reason why you have to do that. You could just say to your child, that's okay, you don't want to wear your shoes. I'll put them on my bag, and if you change your mind, you just let me know and we'll put them on. And then your child might get, I don't know, 2 steps outside of your door and decide it's cold and wet, and yes, they want their shoes. Or they might get all the way to school or all the way to wherever they're going and not feel the need for shoes until they get there. You know, unless you're walking on an area that's got obvious glass or something, there's no reason why your child can't be barefoot. It's the same with wearing a coat. You know, parents will insist that their child has to wear a coat, but your child doesn't have to wear a coat. You know, you can carry your child's coat in your bag, and when your child says, "Mum, I'm cold," you can just say, "That's not a problem. Would you like to put your coat on? Here you go." It doesn't have to be a teaching moment where you say, "Well, if you'd listened to me earlier and you'd put your coat on, then you wouldn't be cold now, would you? So are you going to listen to me next time?" Because connection.
And that's back to getting children to do things. It's like, but I need to get my child to put the shoes on because they have to get in the car and they have to get. And, you know, I mean, none thing is, none of it's easy, you know. So sometimes people say, well, no, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it this way. And I'm going to, your way sounds very long. My way might be that we just stop and I just lay on the floor by my child with their shoes, and we, depending on their age, obviously not a 14-year-old, you know, we might be curious about how the shoes are feeling today. Oh, how are you feeling? Okay, so you might want to go on Jasmine's feet, but you might not. Are you sure? Let's have a chat with Jasmine's foot, you know, and just turn it into a little game. And then the child may or may not want to put them on, but at least it's been a pleasant experience. And it won't take any longer. People always think that, you know, forcing the shoes on the child or saying you're getting a consequence or you're losing this or it takes just as long. It feels faster because there's a lot of adrenaline behind it.
I think actually it takes longer to do it the conventional way, using discipline and punishments and coercion, simply because the disconnection that you create that feeds into the rest of your day. So you're actually stacking up more challenges along the way, which ultimately is going to take way more of your time and energy. And investing the time and the energy to create connection and have a respectful and compassionate approach with your child now ultimately ends up with children who respond to you with respect, compassion, and kindness, who respond to you with patience, who respond to you with trust. You know, all of the things that we're investing in our children because we're prioritizing that connection, because we're prioritizing a respectful and compassionate way of raising them, are all things that they are constantly having modeled to them, and therefore will start to reflect back to us. You know, you hear parents, I mean, I admit I have done this on occasion, but I have yelled at my kids, say, "Would you just be quiet?"
So
I'll use the most volume I can to try and get you to bring your volume down. And we, you know, nearly all of us have been there in one way or another. And
another thing that was occurring to me as well when you went, I can't remember at what point you were saying something, and I thought, and there's that feeling as well from some parents as well, and I'm sure again I must have done this, I don't doubt it, where because I have done all this for you today, so you wanted to go to the park, so I took you to the park, you wanted an ice cream on the way back, so I got you an ice cream. You know, you wanted this, so I did that. You know, so we've done this and we've had a lovely day and we've gone and done the thing that we, you know, we all agreed we wanted to do. And now look at you. And there's that kind of idea that, well, I've invested all this time, effort, money in you, and it's still a kind of getting the child too, you know, so because I've done that, you need to pay me back now by not having a meltdown about bedtime because you've had a, you know, or another thing you hear parents says, oh, but then they ruined the day by blah 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 blah. And it's, you know, you don't, I mean, they say that about presents, don't they? You don't give to get, but it's the same with children. You know, it's not about, okay, so you've had this from me, and again, I don't even imagine what it's like. Well, I tried to very hard at parenting at the moment, where going out has been restricted, and there's been very unusual times. And then parents who are trying to work as well, and it's like, well, I've done that, so now I get to do this. And I wish I could say that would seem fair and okay. It just doesn't work like that. When a child needs connection with you, which just means to be close to you, to speak to you, to whatever it is, they need it. And you know, many of the parents have been contacted and said, well, they can't wait. Well, no, you're right, they can't wait. That bit, you got it. And that doesn't mean that you are in any way failing. It doesn't mean that your child is over demanding. None of those things. It just means they just absolutely adore you, and they love to be as around you and near you and talking to you as is humanly, or not even humanly, possible. And actually, the more they get it, eventually the less they will be grasping for it, because they'll just feel more settled in themselves. And that's not that we're like, yay, tick, job done, but it's just the way of the world. You know, the more that we have that connection, we have a calmer body system, a calmer nervous system. So then when there are challenges in life, instead of going massively into complete meltdown and hysteria and panic, and this is, you know, I've had to train my nervous system very late in life to do this, because I didn't get it when I was a child. I didn't get connection. Therefore, I've lived the whole of my adult life in emergency, disaster, panic mode about literally everything. And I've had to work very hard to now convince my nervous system that 99.999% of the time, life is just fine. And to be able to seek connection. And interestingly, I've stopped, and this is really quite recent as well, trying to get Jane to do things, because that's also the legacy of this. You then raise a child who feels that, well, I have to make myself do this. It's the kind of, you know, still the voice in your head. You need to do this. You're not doing that right. And sadly, I do see it in my son. Some of the things he does, where, you know, he feels like he has to do it that way, because I was getting him to do Lord knows what, poor thing. So yeah, and then I've been doing it to myself all my life as well. I was still doing it sometimes now. I'll be like, right, you need to get up and do this, because, well, actually, do I? Not really. So this will be a forever thing for you and your children, unless you feel safe enough to step into this space and say, actually, I don't want to use this controlling, manipulative, you know, underlying, because it's that when you were saying something, Bea, I was thinking, I just had that massive experience with someone where before they were always connected with me in a nice way, but to get me to do things. And although I was doing them, when we had a big disconnection recently, I just thought, you know what, I'm done with this. It just doesn't feel okay anymore. And then they took some time and they came back to me, and they were no longer trying to get me to do stuff. And there was a real authenticity about the connection, which meant I was able to feel really safe and comfortable about coming back into connection with them and carrying on with the work that we've been doing together. And it was massive. It was like the best lesson in inauthenticity, manipulation and disconnection, and then authenticity, compassion and connection. And it's massively enriched our relationship.
That's incredible.
You know, it was amazing. It was like, oh, here you go. Here's a lesson in this, Jane Evans. Suck this up.
Yeah,
so,
incredible.
You know, if I feel like that as an adult, for a child, it's heartbreaking when they get disconnected from us. It really is. How they show it will vary, but it is always heartbreaking.
And I think what's even worse for a child, not just the disconnection, but the threat of disconnection. When a parent threatens the disconnection in order to get the child to do something. And I, you know, that when I hear parents doing that, and I know the parents are doing their best, but I've experienced so much distress. Oh my goodness, I want to wade in. Of course I don't, but I want to wade in. Jane, this would be a good time, because it's we've been talking for 45 minutes to talk about the work that we do and how those listening can connect with us and work with us or access our products that are available, to buy.
You go first.
Okay.
Because I'm sure I went first last time.
So I already mentioned earlier in this podcast that I work one-on-one with my clients, predominantly adults. Most of those adults are parents, but not all. I work with adults who are recognizing that, all of these things that Jane and I talk about in terms of the impact of our childhoods, they come in and affect every area of our adult life, not just our parenting. So I work with parents and non-parents, and I've just started working with a teenager, so that's exciting. And I work in a one-to-one way. It's a therapeutic use of an energy technique called emotional freedom technique. And if you want to find out more, please just reach out to me. You can contact me. Underneath this video are all of mine and Jane's contact details, ways to find out more. So please reach out to me to find out more about that. And then the other thing that I have available is called the Yes Parenting Digital Pack, which is like an online course or an online program, but you get to do it in whatever way works for you. There's no kind of start date or end date. You get lifetime access. And the whole reason I've done that is because we don't necessarily need to carry the whole toolbox of parenting with us at any one time. Sometimes we just need to be focused on this one little bit, and then another time this one little bit. And it might be that a few months or even a few years down the line, something else comes back in, but in a different way. So the Yes Parenting Digital Pack is this incredible resource, everything to do with compassionate and respectful parenting, told through a yes parenting perspective in real bite-sized chunks in video form with transcripts, subtitles, and also there are some downloadable MP3s, which are meditations and visualizations to support you to bring your nervous system down. And that is available. Again, the link is underneath this video. Jane.
Wow, sounds lovely. So I also work one-to-one with parents, and very much about what Bea and I have been talking about today. As Bea said, we come from this very similar personal and professional experience of you have to kind of upgrade yourself as a parent at this below consciousness level, the stuff that's been wired into you. Have a good clear out of that in order to then plant what you do want. And the technique that I use in my coaching, it's commonly known as QEC, quantum energy coaching. That's exactly what is at the core of the work that I do one-to-one. I also, give a lot of psychoeducation, but it's very much about preparing you to be present in your child's life now in a way that serves you and them. I also have just a short crisis to calm parenting program online at the moment, because I realized that so many people were feeling very overwhelmed. And it's something you can just jump on and use as and when, and then we have a live Q&A together, so you can bring all your questions to that. And I have a range of books for children available. If you find Little Meerkat's Big Panic on Amazon or other book providers who maybe are more ethical than Amazon potentially, then you'll find all the others. And that's me. And Bea, I was wondering, shall I read out the feedback that we got?
Yes.
From Sophia. So Sophia on Instagram messaged us. Actually, it was on the 19th of May, but I still, although I've been using Instagram for a while, I miss bits on it. And Sophia said, I just wanted to tell you how much I admire and love you guys. I'm from Mexico, so we're very international. So I can't be live in the podcast. That was when we were doing it online. And actually, maybe now I would imagine time difference wise, it's too early, but I haven't missed an episode yet. Please, would you consider an episode on sibling rivalry and on bullying, your child being bullied or being the bully, and how to approach these topics? Thank you so much. Well, thank you so much, Sophia. That's literally made our day to get
absolutely
amazing feedback. Thank you. And to know that you're literally not missing one of these. So that's brilliant.
And we will talk about sibling rivalry and bullying probably on our next session, which will be in a couple of weeks. Really, yeah, I mean, really important topics: the bullying, the being the bully, and the being bullied, as well as the sibling rivalry. It's interesting how we always call it sibling rivalry, isn't it, rather than just sibling relationships.
Yeah,
we don't talk about sibling relationships, we just jump to sibling rivalry, which in and of itself automatically carries a judgment.
Well, it's like bullying. I hate the word bullying. I don't ever know how to refer. I mean, I do know how to refer to it, but it's very long and lots of words. But it doesn't sit well with me at all. But they're words that people, it's like tantrums and all these words. They're the words that everybody, as soon as you say them, everyone knows what you're talking about, but they're not words that any of us probably like very much.
No, I agree. And at the end of the day, hurting people hurt people. And that's, it all boils down to that. It's the hurt. Absolutely. It's the hurt within your child or the hurt within you that ends up hurting others, intentionally or unintentionally. It's that's ultimately what's happening in many situations. So just as we come to the end of this conversation then about how do I get my child to whatever, is there anything else you want to add before we talk about our top tips?
No, I don't think so. I feel like I've had a lovely complete buffet today. Thoroughly satisfied. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, so Jane, why don't you share a couple of top tips, practical top tips that people can take away and implement straight away if they wish to?
I think first of all would be getting curious about maybe doing a bit of I can't think of the word now, when you have a lot of stock and you do stock take, there you go, and seeing if you can recognize what is the thing that bugs you most that your child isn't doing. And that can be different at different stages. So, like when my son was older, it used to bug me if I allowed it to, that he didn't bring his dirty plates down, and boy, did he not. And once I got over myself,
it doesn't bother me, but I mean, it doesn't bother me, but I was just thinking about the kinds of dishes that I do have to deal with. And he does sometimes bring them down, but I mean, the state of them sometimes is just unbelievable.
Well, it's that thing. Eventually I got over myself about it, and he just sorted it out once every 6 months or so. And it's hilarious. And then he would wash them all up and then construct this ginormous thing on the sink
training board.
Literally, it was a work of art. But if you sneezed in the kitchen, the whole lot would smash to the ground, which is probably the best thing that could have happened with them anyway. So it's kind of being curious about, well, why does this get to me, and what can I do about it because that's what generally I always had to do was get over myself. But until you work out, okay, well, what really, because sometimes it can feel like everything, and it generally isn't. There generally will be a plat du jour, a thing that is particularly the topic of the day or the week or the month or the stage of development or whatever that's really bugging the life out of you. So just get curious and see if you can identify what that is, because if you can't, then you'll keep tripping over it every time.
My one of those at the moment is that both my boys have a tendency to just go,
oh yes.
And I just honestly, part of me just wants to say, for goodness sake, what is it that you want? You must know. Do you want this or do you want this? Like, that's what wants to come out of me.
Yeah.
So I just get this, do you want to go swimming later? Do you want pizza for tea? Actually, no, that one gets a yes. But like, I don't know, anyway, but that's my current one that I'm kind of just working on in myself. Anyway, so becoming curious was your first one.
Get curious and see if you can identify, and you might, if you do live with someone, they might be able to help you, and you might be able to help them in a non-judgmental way. And number 2 is, I suppose it's about kind of Teflon coating yourself, So find something that you can say or do when you are on FaceTime with the people who keep telling you what you should be doing to or with your child. So have a phrase or something that you know, maybe
like,
you just
fuck off. I'm joking.
That may work.
I do not recommend that, but I was just thinking about how brilliant it would be if you could just be like on the phone and saying, I really think you need to get fuck off.
Yeah, and then just yeah, something that's going to God, we have nobody left in there. Yeah, something that's going to regulate your system. So it might be just rocking your body, because if you rock your body, it will help your brain feel a bit calmer. And you know, in your head, just have a phrase, maybe you say, and something like, letting it go, letting it go, letting it go, letting it go, letting it go. Just something that you say, may accidentally come out of your mouth, who knows. But yeah, because it's very difficult, and you don't necessarily want to be going to war with, you know, whoever it is all the time. But you do need to not come away feeling terrible, absolutely terrible and ashamed and like you're failing again, especially, you know, often our mums, from their place of wanting the best for us and their grandchildren, can do that, and we're very susceptible to things our mums say. So yeah, just have some little technique, some little something that you know that, or failing that, just do what B said.
Yeah, just do what I say. I'm so sorry for yawning then. That was a very unprofessional thing to do.
It's okay. I'm not sure that we are that professional beyond here. In other areas of life, we are very professional.
Well, it all depends what you mean by professional,
I'm
really,
joking.
doesn't it? We're very authentic.
Yeah, we are.
Yes, and one of the things when you were giving that second suggestion about having something that you can say, I thought you were talking about something you can say to them rather than something you can say to yourself. And in case people do want something that they can say to other people, and it may not work in every situation, but one of the things that I did try to say sometimes was, you know, thank you for your suggestion. I'm just trying this at the moment and seeing how it goes. Because when you talk about, I'm trying this at the moment to see how it goes, it's like, oh, it's just a temporary thing, you know, like they can relax. It's not like they're going to do this forever. And, you know, it's almost like you give them permission to relax, to go, oh, okay, she's just doing it for a bit of time and she's going to see it doesn't work. Whereas in my case, actually, I just, you know, everything that I tried and watched to see how it went, for the most part, you know, it was like, oh my God, this is the way forwards. But I think actually it did create a little bit of ease for those who felt the need to share their concerns with me.
That's very diplomatic.
So my first top tip would be connection. Look for ways to connect first thing in the morning, right through till they go to bed. And within that, you know, check that you're meeting your own need for connection and that you're not requiring your child to meet your need for connection. I mean, there will be a definite two-way meeting of needs for connection in terms of, you know, there will be times when you're connecting with your child and it is meeting your need for connection, but your child should never, ever be responsible for meeting your need for connection. Well, they shouldn't be responsible for meeting your need for anything. It is your responsibility as the parent to meet their needs. And as they get older, you know, part of that journey is they begin to recognize more and more what they need, and then they learn how to meet their own needs. And then part of that journey, hopefully, if we're modeling this to them, is they learn how to ask for other people's support to meet their needs. But ultimately, you know, we're raising our children to become adults who recognize that they are responsible for meeting their own needs. So although meeting our child's need for connection may also support us in meeting our need for connection, that's not their responsibility. We need to take responsibility for ensuring that our needs for connection are met elsewhere, whether that's, you know, picking up the phone and talking to our, I don't know, our sister or our best friend, or maybe we're in a women's circle or a men's group, or, you know, whatever it is, that we are fueling that, we're fulfilling that need within ourselves, so that we are able to really pursue connection, and realizing that everybody connects differently. So if you have more than one child, each child may have different preferences for connection. Some may be far more playful. Some may just want quality time. Some may be far more about sharing, you know, their stories and their drawings and their creations with you. Some it may be about physical touch, you know, so really tuning in and understanding how your child most loves to receive that connection time with you. So focusing on connection. And tip number 2 for how to get your child to do something is to take the time to ask yourself, why do I need to get them to do this? Like what's going to go wrong if I don't get to them to do this? You know, and then you can even ask yourself, and then what would be at risk if that happens? So for example, well, I have to get my child in the car because otherwise we're going to be late. Well, what would happen if we were late? Then I would miss my appointment, or then my friend might be cross with me, for example. And then you can even ask yourself, and what would happen then? Well, if I miss my appointment, maybe I might have to pay a fine, or then I'm going to have to organize another appointment. You know, I just don't have the headspace for that. Or regarding the friend, well, then they might get fed up of making arrangements with me, or, you know, I might get this reputation as someone who's not on time. And, you know, and you can actually track that back, and what would happen then, and what would happen then. And what you will discover if you keep tracking it back, and journaling can be a brilliant way to do this, you will find that at the root of that is a fear that you will lose connection, safety, belonging, or love, or maybe all three. But those are the 3 root needs of every single human: safety, belonging, and love. And if at any point, any one of us, whether it's adult or child, feels that there is a potential risk that we're going to lose one of those, you know, we will step into behaviors to ensure that that's not going to happen. And one of the behaviors that we step into is trying to get our child to do something. So taking that time to explore, why do I want to get my child to do this? What might go wrong? What might be at risk for me if they don't do it? Is something that can really, really help you begin to understand yourself more. And then, you know, and then make changes. Because of course we do have to go to appointments. You know, there will be not all appointments necessarily. Some are like, I have appointments for, well, not right now because of lockdown, but, you know, I quite often have appointments for leg waxing, but I don't have to get my legs waxed. That's a personal preference. But if I discovered a lump in my breast, I would have to go to an appointment with my doctor, or at the breast clinic, for example. So bearing in mind that some appointments, for example, we absolutely do have to go to, but others we don't. So just starting to explore those things, and you may find, okay, I'm going to find someone who can wax my legs at a time when there's someone else who can look after the kids, so I'm not trying to take them with me. Actually, not that anyone would ever take their kids with them to that kind of appointment, but people take their kids with them to hair appointments. Let's imagine it's a hair appointment. And, you know, for example, if it's a GP's appointment, then, you know, looking at, okay, well, that is a really important appointment. So how can I make that possible for me to have confidence that I can get to that appointment? Is there, is there support I can bring in to help out with the kids? Or do I need to really think through the day so that if I have to take my kids with me, there isn't a time pressure? You know, if the thing we're trying to get our child to do is around time, we are the adults. Yeah, we need to, we need to rethink things so that there is a spaciousness within which we can be present with our child and go at their speed. You know, if we're trying to get our child to be quiet in the waiting room, then again, that's something else that we need to think ahead. And we need to be the ones looking at, well, actually, what are the things that my child loves to do where they're naturally quiet? Is it when I read them a book? Is it with their Lego? Is it with their teddy? So that we take a book, we take their Lego, we take a teddy with us. So when we start to step back and become curious, and Jane and I have both talked about this, but from slightly different perspectives in terms of our tips, you know, really using that curiosity to give us information, and then that information helps us to move forwards in a way that is more respectful, compassionate and kind towards our children. Do you think we have successfully covered the topic?
I feel that we have, although we could talk for probably another 10 hours, but maybe people might lose the will to live, even though we are very interesting, I find.
And they say they do love listening to us.
Yes, yes.
I have been checking YouTube every now and then, and there aren't any comments, so we haven't missed anything. If you're watching this on the replay and you have got comments, please go ahead and put them there, because we will respond to them. You can find us on Instagram at the Jane Bea Show. You can find us on Facebook, just put in the Jane Bea Show. Look underneath for all the other information, and then somewhere around here will be a circle you can subscribe. Somewhere like on the other side where Jane's face is, I think, or maybe where my face is, because I think we're the other way around on YouTube. I'm not sure. But anyway, on one side of the screen is a thing you can subscribe. Then you'll always know when we go live. On the other side is a video that you might be interested in watching next if you want to. And please share us with your friends. Do feedback. We love to hear from you. We're not always brilliant at seeing our messages straight away, but we do get round to them eventually. And cup of tea and a wee.
Oh, yes. And maybe a bit more cake.
Yeah, you just go break off that little crumb. I am all about the big slice.
Yeah, well, see, it was very long and thin, so there was it wasn't very satisfactory slicing. It just, I haven't had like a whole circular cake. The fruit cakes you get tend to come in long bar type things, but you know, not complaining, literally. Any fruit cake, very welcome. My daughter-in-law, who's a brilliant at baking, point blank refuses to make me fruit cake because apparently it's like, it's disgusting and she can't do it, so won't. No, I know, so I'm not going to get her to do that because that wouldn't be kind. Okay, off we go. Take care, everyone.
Bye.